Somewhere right now, a carrot is growing in the dark. Its leaves are up in the light, feathery and green, drinking the sun. But the part we love is below the soil, in the cool quiet of the earth, slowly filling with color. And that color, that deep glowing orange, is the reason you and I are here today. Because this is a story about carrots for eyesight, carrots for the eyes. The strange, beautiful, centuries-old idea that a humble orange root pulled from the ground and rinsed under cold water might have something to do with the way we see the world. You clicked on this video because you've heard it too, maybe from a grandmother, maybe from a teacher, maybe from a little cartoon rabbit. Eat your carrots, they're good for your eyes. And somewhere in the back of your mind, a question has been waiting quietly for an answer. Is it actually true? Are carrots really good for the eyes, or is it just a story we tell children? So let me promise you something right at the beginning. For the next little while, we are going to sit with this single question, carrots and vision, and turn it over slowly from every side. We'll follow the carrot back through history into ancient soil and old kitchens. We'll look gently and honestly at the real science of beta-carotene and eyesight, of vitamin A and vision. We'll separate the folk wisdom from the facts without losing the beauty of either. And through all of it, we'll keep returning to the one thing you came here for, this simple orange root and its long, remarkable relationship with the human eye. And perhaps, as you listen, there's already a glass of fresh carrot juice somewhere near you or soon will be. If there is, notice its color. That warm, living orange glowing as if it were lit from within. Because that color is not only beauty, that color is a pigment. And that pigment is the very first clue in the long mystery of carrots for eyesight. Hold that thought, we'll come back to what is actually inside that glass. But first, where did this root even come from? To find the beginning of the carrot, we have to travel a long way east, across mountains and dry, high plains, to a region around what we now call Persia and Central Asia. Modern Iran, Afghanistan, and the lands around them. This is where, as far as we can tell, human beings first began to take a wild plant and slowly, patiently turn it into the carrot we know. And here is the first surprise. The wild ancestor of the carrot was not sweet, and it was not orange. It was a thin, pale, tough little root, sharp and almost bitter, with the feathery leaves and white lace-cap flowers you can still find growing along roadsides today. If you tasted it, you would not think of dessert, you would not think of health, you would probably spit it out. But people are curious and patient, and they kept the plants that were a little less bitter, a little thicker, a little kinder to eat. Season after season, seed after seed, they nudged this wild root towards something worth growing on purpose. And the earliest carrots that came from this long work were not orange at all. They were purple, a deep, royal, almost black purple on the outside, and yellow, a pale, buttery yellow at the core. Imagine that for a moment. For most of the carrot's history, if you had asked someone to picture a carrot, they would not have pictured orange. They would have pictured purple and gold. The orange carrot, the one that would one day become the very symbol of eyesight itself, had not yet been born. These early carrots traveled. They moved along trade routes, carried in sacks and satchels, west into the Arab world and the Mediterranean, and slowly across Europe and Asia. Wherever they went, people did what people always do with a new food. They cooked it, they mashed it, they fed it to the sick and the young, and they watched what it seemed to do. Roots were winter food, keeping food you could pull from cold ground when little else would grow. And a food that keeps you alive through the dark months naturally becomes tangled in the human imagination with strength, with vitality, with life itself. And that deep orange color, the color we now take completely for granted, would one day become the very symbol of vision itself. But not yet. because the carrot in those early kitchens was still purple and gold, and its famous partnership with the eyes had not yet been written. To understand how that partnership was truly born, we have to leave the ancient world behind and leap, surprisingly, almost all the way to our own time into one of the strangest chapters in the entire story of carrots and vision. So how did the carrot become orange? The honest answer is that historians still debate the details. But we know that somewhere around the 16th and 17th centuries in the Netherlands, orange carrots became common bread and stabilized and grown until the orange root became the standard, the one that would spread across the world and push the old purple and yellow varieties into memory. There's a charming story that Dutch growers made the carrot orange to honor their royal family, the House of Orange. It's a lovely tale, and you'll hear it repeated often, but most careful historians treat it as more legend than settled fact. What we can say for certain is that the orange carrot, once it arrived, was here to stay, and with it came that unmistakable color, rich in the pigment that gives our whole story its meaning. Now, let me tell you the moment when carrots and eyesight became bound together in the modern mind, not in ancient times, but surprisingly recently, and under the most dramatic circumstances imaginable. The Second World War. Britain, under nighttime bombing raids, plunged into blackouts so total that people learned to move through their own streets in complete darkness. And during this time, British pilots began, remarkably, to shoot down enemy aircraft at night with uncanny success. The reason was a closely guarded secret, a new technology airborne radar that let them find their targets in the dark. But you cannot advertise a secret. So the story goes that the authorities offered the public a different explanation, a cover story. Our pilots, they suggested, could see so well in the dark because they ate a great many carrots. It was in part a clever piece of wartime messaging. It helped hide the real technology. It encouraged a hungry, rationed nation to eat carrots, which were plentiful when other foods were scarce. And it wrapped the whole thing in a promise every civilian wanted to believe during the blackout: eat this and you too will see better in the dark. Whether it truly fooled the enemy, historians still argue about, but it certainly planted something deep in all of us. That wartime idea, carrots for night vision, carrots for the eyes, took root in kitchens and classrooms and never quite left. And here is the fascinating part, the part we'll spend the rest of our time on. Hidden inside that piece of propaganda was a small, real seed of truth. Not the whole truth, not a magic truth, but a genuine thread connecting carrots and vision that science can actually explain. So let's pull on that thread now, gently, and see what's really there. Let's set the legends and the slogans aside for a moment and look inside the carrot itself, because the true connection between this root and your eyes is written in something far smaller than any story. It's written in pigment, in chemistry, and in the living tissue at the very back of the eye. And that is exactly where the science begins. So let's open the carrot up and look inside. That orange color you keep imagining is not just for beauty. It comes from a family of natural pigments called carotenoids, and the most famous of them, the one carrots are named after, is beta-carotene. Plants make these pigments partly to help them catch and manage sunlight. In a sense, when you look at a carrot, you are looking at captured light. Sunlight that fell on green leaves was turned into sugars and pigments and was sent down into the root to be stored in the dark. A small piece of sunlight buried in the soil, waiting. Now, here is where beta-carotene and eyesight finally meet. When you eat a carrot, especially with a little fat nearby, and we'll come back to why that matters. Your body can take some of that beta carotene and convert it into something it needs urgently and constantly. Vitamin A. Beta carotene is what's called a provitamin. It isn't vitamin A itself, but it's a doorway to it. And your body cleverly makes only as much as it needs and leaves the rest, which is one big reason beta carotene from food is so gentle and so safe. And vitamin A and vision are tied together at the deepest possible level, right down in the living tissue of the eye. At the very back of your eye is the retina, a thin, delicate layer that works like the film in an old camera or the sensor in a modern one. It's the place where light finally becomes a signal your brain can read. And within the retina are tiny light-catching cells, including the ones we call rods, which are responsible for seeing in dim light, at dusk, at night, in the shadows. Inside those rod cells is a remarkable light-sensitive substance. Scientists call it rhodopsin, sometimes visual purple, and to build it, your body needs vitamin A. Every time light strikes it, the substance changes shape and fires a signal, and then it has to be rebuilt to catch the next particle of light. It is used up and remade over and over, thousands upon thousands of times in a quiet chemical dance that never stops as long as your eyes are open. And the raw material for that endless rebuilding is vitamin A, the very thing your body can make from the beta carotene in a carrot. This is the real thread inside the old story. This is what the wartime slogan was clumsily pointing at. Not magic, chemistry. The pigment that makes carrots orange can become the vitamin that helps your eyes work in the dark. Now, that is a genuinely beautiful fact, and it deserves a moment to settle. The orange pigment in a carrot, born from sunlight, can become the raw material your eyes use to see in low light. But before anyone rushes off to eat a whole bag of carrots expecting to see in the night like an owl, I have to tell you the other half of this truth, the honest, more serious half that the cheerful slogans always leave out. Because the story of vitamin A and vision has a shadow side, and it matters far more than any legend. Here is the part that is easy to get wrong, so let me say it carefully and honestly. When a person does not get enough vitamin A, their vision genuinely suffers, and it often shows up first in exactly the way the old stories describe. The eyes struggle to adjust to darkness. Stepping from a lit room into a dark one, or driving at night becomes harder and harder. This is called night blindness, and it is real, and it has been known for a very, very long time. In fact, vitamin A deficiency remains one of the leading causes of preventable vision loss in parts of the world where diets are poor and this nutrient is scarce, especially among young children. That is a serious, well-established fact, not a folktale. For someone in that situation, foods rich in beta-carotene, carrots among them, aren't a charming idea. They can be genuinely, profoundly important because they help the body correct a true lack. But now comes the honest twist, the part the slogans always leave out. If your body already has enough vitamin A, if you eat a reasonably varied diet and you're not deficient, then eating extra carrots will not give you superhuman sight. It will not let you read a license plate 3 streets away, or see in pitch darkness like a cat, or throw away your glasses. Once your body has what it needs for healthy vision, more beta-carotene simply doesn't push your eyesight beyond its natural limits. The carrot is not filling you with extra vision. It is helping make sure you don't fall short. And that distinction between correcting a lack and creating a superpower is the single most important truth in this entire story. So, carrots don't hand you perfect eyesight, but they do help the body maintain healthy vision as part of a balanced diet, and that quieter promise is worth honoring. Because Vision isn't only about that light-sensitive layer at the back of the eye, it's also about the front, the cornea, the clear, curved window that light passes through first. That surface needs to stay smooth, moist, and healthy, and vitamin A plays a role in keeping the tissues of the eye's surface in good condition too. When the body lacks it, the eye's surface can suffer along with its night vision. So the nutrient we can draw from carrots supports the eye from front to back, not as a cure, but as ordinary essential maintenance. Let that reframe the whole thing for you. Carrots for eye health isn't a promise of magic, it's a promise of not going without. And notice what that quietly tells us. Eye health was never really about one heroic food eaten all by itself. It was always about something larger, about variety, about freshness, about a whole way of eating in which the carrot plays its part alongside many other colorful natural foods. That idea of color and variety and balance is something modern nutrition is quite sure of today. But it is also something older traditions understood long ago in their own poetic language, centuries before science could explain why. Long before we had microscopes, long before anyone had heard the word vitamin, people were watching their food and their bodies with enormous care. They had no laboratories. What they had was observation, generation after generation of it, and a gift for turning what they saw into stories and rules for living. And across many cultures, a certain quiet pattern appears. Deeply colored plants, the reds, the oranges, the deep greens, were often treated as foods of vitality, foods you gave to someone who was weak, or recovering, or facing a hard winter. Traditional systems of eating and healing in many parts of the world paid close attention to color, to whether a food seemed cooling or warming, to how it appeared to affect energy and strength and clarity. Brightly colored roots and juices were often linked in these traditions with blood, with warmth, with life force, and sometimes with the eyes and the clarity of one's sight. Now, it would be easy to do one of two foolish things here. One is to laugh at these ideas as mere superstition. The other is to treat them as secret proven science that modern doctors are somehow hiding from you. Both would be a mistake. The truth is gentler and more interesting than either. These old traditions did not have the language of nutrients. What they had was a poetic language for the same underlying reality. When a traditional healer looked at a glowing orange root and called it a food of vitality, and when a modern scientist looks at that same root and says rich in beta-carotene, a source of provitamin A, full of antioxidant compounds in a sense, both are circling the same true thing from opposite sides. One is speaking in metaphor, the other in measurement. The old wisdom noticed the pattern. Modern nutrition explains part of the mechanism. Neither one is the whole story by itself. And here is where those old observers were genuinely, impressively right. People did notice across many places and many centuries that certain foods seemed to help people see better in dim light. They couldn't have told you about rod cells or vitamin A, but they saw the effect that when people ate certain nourishing foods, their eyes coped better with the dark. Their eyes and their observation were ahead of the science that would one day catch up. That's not superstition. That's careful human watching, waiting patiently for the language to describe it. So we can honor the old traditions without pretending they were laboratories, and we can respect the science without pretending it invented everything. Carrots for the eyes lives in both worlds at once, a folk memory and a chemical fact, holding hands across the centuries. And there is one more way to see this ancient bond between the carrot and the eye, a way that is less about kitchens and traditions and more about light itself. Because when you really understand what a carrot is and what an eye is, you begin to see that these two things were, in a sense, made for each other. Think about what the eye actually is. Of all the parts of your body, the eye is the one built entirely around light. It exists for one purpose: to receive light, to catch it, to turn it into the seen world. Every waking moment, light streams into your eyes. Sunrise, faces, color, motion, and delicate living tissue absorbs it and translates it tirelessly into sight. The eye is, in a very real sense, the most light-devoted organ you have. And now think about the carrot again. The carrot's color also comes from light. Up in the green leaves, sunlight is captured and transformed, and the pigments born from that process, the carotenoids, are sent down and stored in the root. The orange of the carrot is quite literally a record of sunlight that fell on a plant, a small store of captured sun kept safe underground. So there's a kind of poetry hidden inside the biology. You take this stored sunlight, this orange pigment born from light, and you eat it. Your body turns part of it into vitamin A. And that vitamin travels to the one organ in your body whose entire life is about light and helps it keep doing its work. Sunlight, gathered by a plant, passed into you, arriving finally in the very tissue that lets you see the sun. The carrot and the eye joined by light from beginning to end. When you understand it that way, carrots for eyesight stop sounding like an old wives' tale and start sounding like something close to elegant. There's also a practical reason nutrition matters so much for the eye specifically. Tissues that work constantly with light and oxygen face a certain kind of wear. Wherever there is bright light and lively activity, unstable molecules can form as a byproduct, and living tissues rely on protective compounds to help keep everything in balance. The eye, bathed in light all day long, is exactly the kind of place where the body's antioxidant defenses matter. And colorful plant foods, carrots among them, are one of the ways we supply the raw materials for those defenses. Not as a cure, again, simply as good ordinary support for tissue that works hard in a demanding environment. And here is something worth knowing. That famous orange pigment is not the carrot's only gift to the story of your eyes. Because inside that same humble root, there is a whole quiet community of other nutrients, and a couple of them have a connection to vision that is even more direct than beta-carotenes. Let's meet them. Inside that orange root, there is fiber, the sturdy structural part of the carrot, the part you feel when you bite into a raw one with a satisfying crunch. Fiber does its patient work in digestion and is one of the quiet reasons whole vegetables are so good for us. There's potassium, a mineral your body uses constantly. There's a form of vitamin K called K1 involved in the body's ordinary maintenance. There's some vitamin C, that familiar antioxidant. And there are other members of the carotenoid family beyond beta-carotene, each adding its own color and its own contribution. Two of those relatives deserve a special mention in a story about the eyes, and their names are lutein and zeaxanthin. These are carotenoids that the body gathers and concentrates in one particular place, the macula, a small central region of the retina responsible for your sharpest, most detailed vision, the part you're using to read a face or a word right now. In the macula, these pigments are thought to act a little like natural filters and protectors, helping to manage some of the light that reaches this precious central zone. Now, I want to be honest with you here, as I've tried to be all along. Carrots are not the very richest source of lutein and zeaxanthin. The deep leafy greens tend to carry more. But carrots do contribute, and they belong to the same colorful family of foods that supplies these eye-friendly pigments, which is, once again, an argument not for carrots alone, but for carrots as part of a colorful, varied plate. And there is something in all of this that feels especially close to home in the world we live in now. Because think for a moment about how your own eyes spend their days. For most of human history, the eye looked out at distant hills, at firelight, at faces across a room. But today, so much of our waking time is spent looking at something much closer and much brighter, a glowing screen held at arm's length or less, hour after hour after hour. Phones, computers, televisions, the very screen you are looking at right now. Our eyes were not built for that, and they let us know it. You've felt it. Surely that dryness at the end of a long day, that tiredness, that slightly strained, aching feeling behind the eyes after too many hours of staring at bright glass. It even has a name. Some call it digital eye strain. And it is one of the reasons that caring for our eyes matters more today, perhaps, than it ever has before. Now, let me be careful and honest here, because this is exactly the kind of place where big promises get made and shouldn't be. No carrot and no glass of juice will undo the effect of a screen or protect you from long hours of staring. That protection comes from gentler, more ordinary habits, looking up and away into the distance now and then, letting your eyes rest, remembering to blink, stepping outside into natural daylight. Those simple things matter enormously, and no food can replace them. But the food you eat is part of that same picture of care. Remember those light-filtering pigments the eye gathers into its central, sharpest zone, the ones the carrot carries in its own modest way, along with its colorful cousins on the plate? In an age when our eyes work harder with light than any generation before them, it simply makes quiet sense to give the body the raw materials it draws upon through a varied, colorful, natural diet. Not as a shield, not as a cure, simply as one small part of caring day by day for two remarkable organs that do an extraordinary amount of work. Do you see the pattern that keeps returning? Every honest road in this story leads to the same quiet place. Not eat this one magic food, but eat a range of colorful, whole, natural foods and let the carrot take its rightful generous place among them. That's what natural foods for eye health actually means. Not a single hero, a whole cast. And that really is the honest heart of this whole story. Not a magic food, a generous one taking its natural place in a colorful, varied way of eating. Which brings us at last to the simple pleasure that probably drew many of you here in the first place. The fresh carrot itself and the bright glass of juice pressed from it. You may be feeling the pull of it already, the simple pleasure of fresh food prepared by hand, poured cold and bright into a glass. Let's talk about that pleasure honestly, because it's part of the story too. There is something genuinely lovely about raw carrots and fresh carrot juice. The color is at its most vivid. The aroma when you first cut into a fresh carrot is green and sweet and alive. And there is a kind of ritual in the making of it, the washing, the peeling or scrubbing, the sound of the juicer, the way the orange river pours out and fills the glass. Preparing fresh food from nature slows you down. It connects you for a few minutes to something older and calmer than the rush of the day. That feeling is real, and it's a perfectly good reason to enjoy fresh carrot juice as part of a natural, everyday lifestyle. Carrot juice for eyes, carrot juice simply for pleasure, both are fine reasons to pour a glass. But let me keep my promise of honesty, even here, even when it would be easier to just cheer for raw food. You will sometimes hear that cooking kills a carrot, that heat makes it dead or worthless. That simply isn't true, and I won't tell you it is. In fact, gentle cooking can soften the carrot's tough cell walls and in some cases make its beta-carotene a little easier for the body to reach. A cooked carrot is not a dead carrot. Both raw and cooked carrots have a place. So if you love raw carrots and fresh juice, wonderful, enjoy them. And there are plenty of reasons to But please don't feel you've failed if a carrot in your kitchen sometimes meets a pot of soup. Nature is more forgiving than the slogans suggest. There is, though, one real and meaningful difference between eating a whole carrot and drinking its juice, and it's worth understanding. When you juice a carrot, you get a concentrated, glorious rush of color and nutrients and natural sugars, but you leave much of the fiber behind. When you eat the whole carrot, you get that fiber, that crunch, that slower and steadier experience. Neither is wrong. Fresh juice is a bright, concentrated pleasure. The whole carrot is a fuller, more grounding food. The wisest approach, as almost always in this story, is room for both. Some fresh juice for the joy and the color, and plenty of whole carrots for the fiber and the substance. And whether you take your carrots raw and crunchy, or pressed into a bright glass of juice, or softened into a warm bowl of soup, remember that they are all still the same generous root, still carrying that same orange gift. Food meant to care for your health is allowed also to simply taste good and feel like a small pleasure in your day. So let's gather up everything we've learned and turn it into something you can actually use. We're near the end of our story now, and I want to set everything we've walked through gently into your hands. We began with an old, half-believed idea, carrots for eyesight, and we followed it a long way. Back to a bitter wild root in ancient Persia, through purple and yellow carrots, and the eventual arrival of orange, into a wartime legend built on a small seed of real truth. Down into the retina, into the rod cells, and the light-sensitive chemistry that vitamin A makes possible, we met the serious reality of deficiency and the honest limits of what a well-fed body gains from extra carrots. We heard the old traditions and the new science speaking in their different languages about the same colorful foods. And we watched again and again that every honest path led back to the same modest, sane conclusion. Variety, color, freshness, and the carrot taking its natural place among many good foods. Because that in the end is what caring for your eyes truly looks like. Not a single dramatic food, eaten once in hope, but small, steady, colorful acts of care, repeated day after ordinary day. So let me turn now from the story to something plain and practical, how you might actually bring carrots into your life sensibly and happily without ever tipping into excess or fear. Let's keep this simple and reasonable the way a good, honest friend would tell you. Rather than a doctor writing a prescription, for most healthy adults, enjoying carrots regularly is an easy, ordinary pleasure. A carrot or two a day, eaten whole or added to meals, is a perfectly sensible amount for many people. Nothing extreme, nothing to measure anxiously. If you love fresh carrot juice, a modest glass, think a small glass rather than a large jug is enough to enjoy the color and the goodness without overdoing it. There's no need to drink it by the liter. More is not better here, and a gentle amount is plenty. Does the timing matter? Not very much, honestly. Morning, afternoon, or evening, choose whatever fits your life and feels good to you. A fresh carrot juice in the morning can be a bright, cheerful way to begin the day. Carrots with a meal at any hour work just as well. The best time is simply the time you'll actually keep doing. Here's one genuinely useful tip drawn straight from the science we covered. Because beta-carotene is fat-soluble, a little healthy fat alongside your carrots helps your body absorb it. A drizzle of olive oil, a few nuts, a little avocado, or simply eating them as part of a normal meal that contains some fat, any of these helps that orange pigment do its work. It's a small thing that makes a real difference, and it's one of those quiet places where the science becomes genuinely practical. And keep variety at the very heart of it. Carrots are wonderful, but they are one color on a much larger palette. Alongside them, let there be leafy greens, other vegetables and fruits, a whole spectrum of natural foods. That variety is worth far more to your eyes and to your whole body than any single food eaten to excess. Now, a gentle word about that excess. If a person drinks very large amounts of carrot juice day after day, something curious and harmless can happen. The skin, especially on the palms of the hands and the soles of the feet, can take on a faint yellow-orange tint. This is called carotenemia, and I want you to hear this clearly. It is not dangerous, and it is not permanent. It's simply the carotenoids becoming visible in the skin, and it fades on its own when carrot intake returns to normal. It's the body's mild cosmetic way of saying, that's plenty. Nothing to fear, just a signal to ease off a little. And notice, too, the reassuring news buried inside that fact. Your body regulates how much vitamin A it makes from all that beta-carotene, which is why food carotenoids don't cause the kind of vitamin A overload that can sometimes come from certain supplements. Food, as usual, is gentle. Finally, the most important practical words of all. Everything I've shared today is a story and general information about a food. It is not medical advice, and carrots are not a treatment for any eye condition. If you have any concern about your eyes or your vision or a medical condition, or if you take medication, please speak with a qualified healthcare professional or an eye doctor. Carrots can support eye health as one happy part of a balanced diet. They cannot replace your doctor, your glasses, or proper medical care, and no honest story about them would ever pretend otherwise. So here we are at the end of our journey with the carrot resting quietly in our hands. It is not magic, and I hope if this video has given you anything, it's the freedom to let go of the magic and love the real thing instead, because the real thing is quite enough. This humble orange root carries color born from sunlight. It carries the memory of ancient soil and of patient hands that turned a bitter weed into a sweet and nourishing food. It carries a wartime legend and a genuine seed of truth. And it carries, folded inside its bright flesh, the very pigment that your body can turn into a vitamin your eyes have needed since the moment you first opened them to the light. Carrots will not hand you perfect eyesight. They will not undo the years or replace your glasses or cure what ails the eye. But as part of a whole life of colorful, natural, caring eating, they will do their quiet, faithful part, helping your body keep the eyes supplied with what they need to go on doing their extraordinary daily work of turning light into a seen world. And perhaps that's the gentlest lesson the carrot has to teach, that caring for your eyes was never really separate from caring for the rest of you. The same simple habits, colorful food, freshness, variety, and a little joy in the preparing of a meal quietly serve your eyes and your whole body at once. Care for the whole, and the eyes are cared for too. So the next time you pull a carrot from the crisper, or scrub one under cold running water, or watch that bright orange river pour into a glass, I hope you'll pause for just a moment. Notice the color that captured piece of sunlight. Think of the long road it traveled to reach your kitchen, and the older, deeper road that connects this simple route to the story of human sight. And then enjoy it without fear and without illusion for exactly what it is, a small, beautiful, everyday act of care. A carrot, a glass of fresh juice, the color of sunlight in your hand. Take care of your whole self, and your eyes will thank you for it. Thank you for spending this time with me, and here's to seeing the world in all its color for a long and lovely time to come.